Now I'm going to say za vaše Zdorovie, and to all of our listeners.
This. I'm looking at you, gonna chills.
Brutal. I will say this is very brutal. I'm gonna have an immediate zakuska here because this is So this is Yura and
Kato.
And we're gonna talk about the most famous Russian beverage that there is, which is
vodka, right? Vodочка, right?
Vodka, right? Which sounds like voda, right? But
you got to make it sound nice. Vodочка has that little odочка. It's good. It's a pleasant word. It can be bad.
Уменьшительной form, as they say, right? So it's just like also there's a difference in Russian between попить and выпить, right? So you have to know that little difference.
Double meanings to everything, of course.
Yes. So vodka is something that, of course, is very much defines Russian beverages, Russian alcoholic beverages, of course. Essentially, it is basically just very concentrated grain alcohol that has been taken down to, let's say, 40 to 60% concentration. That's if we're going to define it, distilled grain alcohol that's been taken into this distillation. I mean, it's been diluted to the point where we can more easily drink it.
Just ask any American, what's the first couple of things that they think about when you say Russia? Not too political here right now. When they think of Russia, they think of vodka. It's like it's there. It's a drink. You're not talking about distillation, the percentages, and the alcohol. It's vodka. It's a vodka thing. It's Russian.
Correct. So, of course, the Poles are also going to raise their hand because they're very much into vodka, and they tend to be very their potato-based vodkas are pretty much their staple there. But either way, if we take a look at how vodka originates in Russia, essentially we're looking at somewhere around the 15th century, roughly. Legend has it that the Genoese a Genoese delegation introduced it to Dmitry Donskoy, and he was supposedly very happy with it. But because back then there was only like medovucha, this kind of kvass, beer kind of stuff.
Fermented.
Fermented. And here you have this very finely distilled alcoholic beverage. Well, of course, the process was still perfected until later on into the 19th century. That's the current vodka that we know today essentially is a 19th century exponent. But its origins go back to around just before Ivan Grozny's time. And what's interesting is that it was kind of originally more of an antiseptic than a beverage. But, Russians always find a second purpose for things.
Sure.
So, Ruskaya smikalka. So, vodka, definitely a staple of the Russian table in the pre-revolutionary era. Also, again, like we mentioned, Poland, the so-called, in the Wikipedia, there's a term called vodka belt, which also would include actually even Scandinavian countries as well. Sure. They put Slovakia in there as well. Of course, the Baltic countries. I mean, again, for Russians, it has always been a staple part, as long as we can remember, of our culture and our Zarubezhny culture. Those Russians that left Russia in the 20th century, in the early part of the 20th century, they took those traditions with them. And they had to be in other countries where they had to find some equivalent of vodka. Not that we don't drink other things, of course, but vodka is definitely something I think you would agree that we reserve for special occasions, special gatherings.
Absolutely.
When people... Zastolia, праздничное zastolia,
absolutely.
Christmas, Easter, and then, of course, blины масленица. I think that's where it's really the star of the show because, I mean, with caviar and all the fish and all the savory things you have going on there, vodka just works so well.
Yeah, with that nice fatty stuff with the butter and so on, of course. You have to drink it down. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, I think both of us will agree that it probably took us a little time to get into drinking vodka as kids, right? Because it's much easier to drink wine and beer, and vodka is like, rocket fuel.
Yeah, whatever rocket fuel tastes like, right? But yeah, it was something out of a taboo, almost like a thing. Like, and you get that whiff, and the first time you drink anything, you're like, if it's not sweet, if it's not sour, whatever, it's that technical smell and taste. If you don't know how to drink vodka, we'll have a podcast how to do it later on.
We have to get our history lecture done first before we have fun,
right?
So, because we are going to be tasting some vodka here for you guys. So, So yeah, and then by the way, speaking of special occasions, we have our famous Charochka, right, where someone walks out with the zolotoya blюдце, although usually it's not zolotoya, but they got the blюдце, they
Right.
got the shot glasses, and at
Right.
all very, especially in weddings and other events, especially when a couple is celebrated, we sing Charochka моя серебряная на золотом блюде поставленная, кому
Yeah.
чару пить, кому здраво быть, пей чару, будь здраво, and then Svet, whoever it is, and then pejdadna, pejdadna, pej.
Yep.
So, and that traditionally has always been vodka has been the drink, although, these days we all switch it up and do other things, especially women that don't really tend to like vodka. So, that's our tradition. So let's talk a little bit more about what makes a vodka essentially. What are the ingredients that go into this distillation process here?
Well, the basis of vodka, right? We could talk about potatoes and grains and corns and so on, but traditionally it was made out of wheat, and it's a process. What is moonshine? What is samagon? Right? It's still this process of distillation. You have to add a little bit of sugar. You're adding a different combination of water. You need fresh water, and you got to. There are vodkas out there that's made out of North Pole ice because it's considered that much clean water. So, well, whatever it comes from. So the base is, of course, going to be grain, wheat in this case, in Russia. However, Soviet times, and we could hear this. Well, my grandmother used to make, up in the dacha, in the villages, derevnya, out of potato, and that's moonshine, samagon, and so on. And granted, yeah, you'll hear that, and I've tasted that stuff. So, but we're not going to go that far. The idea is vodka traditionally was made out of wheat, and what our parents, what our grandparents would drink is not homemade vodka, but actually bottled vodka. Right?
Although, in all fairness, as you pointed out once to me, that when supplies were lacking, our people would basically take spirits, right? That's the
Grain
grain
alcohol.
alcohol, and turn it into vodka,
Yeah,
right?
because it
I
was
mean, I can't
cheaper.
imagine how that tasted, but
It was cheaper. It was cheaper, right? My grandmother had bottles of grain alcohol. Grain alcohol was available at every alcohol store, every liquor store. They used to supply that. Today, there's only one brand that's available, and you could buy it, but no one's really focused on making their own because prices have differently gone differently, right? So,
interesting. Yeah, no, because that's the thing. In our immigracja, not everything was always available, depending where you lived. And by the way, also a lot of us came from Yugoslavia, right? Like your family, my family, part of my family anyway. So over there, I don't know how it was with vodka over there, but one national drink that entered into our repertoire was the Rakij or the Slivovica, the plum brandy that was traditional to the Balkan area. And you can also, it's popular also in Greece, Bulgaria, etc. And that one you don't take shots with, you sip it. But it's about the same proof as vodka is. And at my table, my father's mom, my grandma, she always had rakia at the table. They would drink some and say luta rakia, etc. So that was kind of the vodka substitute.
exactly, it was a substitute. That's what I want you to just say, right? That if vodka was not readily available, and it could have not been readily available. We don't know. Back in the war years, I'm pretty sure it was difficult. So what
Yeah,
was more available was rakis.
right. So essentially, now if we bring ourselves into the United States over here, we also have a situation where there's a cultural difference because we're going to talk about the history of vodka in America. It's a very interesting subject. But there still exists, I think you'll agree, a difference between how we Russians consume vodka and how Americans drink vodka, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Uh,
Yeah.
we have a understanding. Well, Russians. I mean, just think Russian. Like I said in the beginning, when you ask an American what's the first thing they think is vodka, bears, and then they'll add some fibs here, myths about bears on tricycles drinking vodka, right? So we are traditional vodka drinkers and only vodka drinkers. There's no mixes, right? So we would have vodka shots or shots of vodka, sorry to say that.
Right. And again, we do have a master class coming up for you there. But that's the whole thing. Americans still think of vodka as the main ingredient of a Bloody Mary or a screwdriver, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of the number one go-to thought that Americans have with vodka. What am I going to put this into, right?
But there's a
Although,
reason. There was a reason for it. We understand the reason. That's the history.
right, correct. But the thing is that's interesting is that you also take a look at any liquor store, and you're always going to see flavored vodkas there in very large quantities. Now, of course, in Russian, we also do our nastoiki. We flavor our vodkas as well. But in America, it's just like there has just never been this tradition of the pure experience of drinking pure, unflavored vodka. Unlike, for example, like in America, okay, if you're going to do that, it's going to be whiskey, probably, right?
Whiskey or tequila. Tequila is
Right.
also shots.
Right. So Russians are always consuming pretty much most of the time the pure deal, right? Not flavored vodkas, although we certainly love doing our own nastoika. We could certainly do it. We'll talk about that as well. So basically, yeah, this is the cultural difference that we sort of have still in America. Another interesting, yes, and of course, I think Americans do this too, right? We always have our vodka cult. But what will we never do that an American bartender will do with their vodka?
Well, it's not the right thing to do, is right. As if you're going to a bar and they don't have frozen vodka or a bottle of vodka in the freezer, they usually will take vodka, put it in a shaker, put some ice cubes in there, shake it up, and pour it into shot glasses. Which it's either planned that way, might be a smaller dosage, right? And you want 50 grams and you're getting 40 grams, and the rest is 10 grams of water. So whatever the case may be, that's usually their way out, and it's not what we want, right?
When you see the bartender doing this with your vodka, there's a problem.
Yeah, whatever. Show.
Send it back. Yeah, that's the thing. It's got to be really pure because that, the proof is really, and not only that, but who knows where that ice has been made.
Right,
the quality of the water, as you mentioned, was such an important part of that whole process.
Oh, exactly. The purity of the water is very important.
Right.
You can't make it out of city water.
Now, if we take a look at what our poor compatriots are doing behind the Iron Curtain over there, refrigeration was kind of an iffy thing. And when people, when Soviet people in Soviet Russia were drinking vodka pre 90s, of course, they wouldn't always drink it chilled. And I mean, to me, that's really like drinking carpet cleaner. Okay. Just the thought of that makes me ugh. And I remember when there was a funny anecdote. There was a joke in a film where someone's offering somebody vodka there, and they're going, "Vodka, утром теплую из мыльницы с удовольствием." Like you're gonna drink it even out of a soap dish, warm, in the morning. It's insane.
If you ever been to Russia in recent years, right, you've got a whole aisle, supermarket aisle of all different sizes and flavors, and not maybe so much now imported vodkas there. But nevertheless, you have a whole and people still to this day will leave out there and could easily open it up and chug it down without a problem. So it's drinking it warm. It's still common. It's not a thing that's gone away. People, there might have been refrigeration issues back in the 60s and 50s, but it doesn't matter. People still drank vodka, and they'll drink Coca-Cola. And a lot of Russians don't like ice in their drinks. They don't want ice with their drinks, period. And they don't want their lemonade or, холодный чай. There's no such thing. They don't want iced tea. They want tea. So
well, it is a colder climate, of course, than here, but
it's a culture. It's whatever. It's that region that really doesn't care for iced things. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, no, it's a very interesting point. So let's now bring ourselves here to the Russian emigre that came to the United States in the 50s, which is where our families come from. And some of them came in the 20s and 30s, as we discussed. We have a very good podcast, by the way, on the Russians of Hamilton Heights, where we discuss Russians setting foot here in the United States for the first time and having their little micro communities here. And the likeliest vodka that they would have heard about here is Smirnoff. And that is an actual real Russian vodka that migrated to the United States and the rest of the world as a result of the revolution. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, Vladimir Smirnoff, right? The son of Peter Smirnoff came to left Russia with the recipe, with the idea that he might be able to reestablish it somewhere along the way. So he ended up going to Constantinople, Istanbul, onwards to Europe, to Paris, right? And then eventually making his way to America. And though in Paris, he thought, see, Paris was already, or let's say the French knew what vodka was. You know, you had the Napoleon era uh, French troops who came to Russia, right? So they already had some vodka understanding. So there's some vodka knowledge. Eventually, when the Russians went back and forth, so vodka was there ready. Uh, and eventually decided, well, America is a new country, the new world, and developing world. So he wanted to come out. He thought that vodka would be an interesting thing in the States. Things didn't go exactly the best way, and he had to do. He had to take other moves, take other plans, and depression the hit America, prohibition, then World War II. Everything was stopped. He's losing money. He had a friend, uh, Knudit is a very odd name to pronounce. What he got together with him and decided to sell the recipe to him to somehow salvage Smirnoff vodka. Smirnoff eventually got into Jack Martin's hands, and he decided to take vodka a completely different route. Not so much as in Russian, but to market it differently. And that's where even the labeling, because even Smirnoff, when it was sold initially, it was just written vodka with a couple of medals on top. And you could see that on the old bottle still. You could see the old the medals on there. He eventually put down Smirnoff to be visible. So if you find some antique bottles, you can still find some antique bottles being sold on eBay and so on without Smirnoff written on top. So you would see the crowns. But Smirnoff, they had to present it that way. And another gimmick was to bring in the American public to understand what is vodka. American public was a combination of so many different cultures and people and heritages. So they initially thought of selling vodka as a white whiskey. How else are you going to explain? It's hard to imagine today, but it was actually labeled as white whiskey. Anything to capture their interest, but it wasn't working, right? Again, prohibition, World War II, everything stopped, remarketing. And Martin kicked up the idea that it's going to have to be sold as a mixed ingredient, right? So it's vodka with a mix, with something. So Martin came up with the idea that with their connections in California, there was a person who was trying to sell his ginger beer, and it wasn't doing great. And there was a lady involved with the copper mines, and they were trying to do something with copper. It wasn't working. They were, it's all this is late 40s, early 50s. And the idea was to create a copper mug, eventually, ginger beer, Smirnoff vodka, and a squeeze of lime, right? And to create this Moscow Mule. Nobody knows out of the people, though. They don't know who actually said it first with the how to title it as a Moscow Mule. But I think if you think about it deep enough, Moscow represented Russia. a mule represented moving the the wagons in the copper mines. So maybe that was the idea how to come up with this. That's the only logical way. But they like this idea. There's no mules in Moscow, right? So this idea was pretty creative and it caught on, but it didn't catch up enough. A lot of people, you had to sell the idea to bartenders. And this is at the time when Polaroid camera started to kick in as well, and they wanted to sell their cameras. And so Martin came, literally the owner of the company, right, went out there, bought a Polaroid camera with a whole bunch of film, asking a bartender, literally so many bartenders, going to each one, asking them, take a photo, and I'll present this photo. You could keep this photo as long as you make this Moscow Mule, and start offering it. And that gimmick worked, right? But it's still a lot of investment. They would still have to buy a whole bunch of these copper mugs, and that was not working out. So the next step was to work with Knudit, who was the advertising manager for Martin. And the idea was to make mixed drinks that is a vodka with orange juice. Though not canned orange juice, it had to be freshly squeezed orange juice. And so that came up with a screwdriver. Another drink, Bloody Mary drink, right? Vodka, tomato juice. It was mixed drinks, right? And that's where it all developed. So all these Bloody Marys and screwdrivers came about. How do they call it screwdriver? How do they call it Bloody Mary? That's lost. But that's where it came in. Vodka was not meant for shots, not yet, not to the American public. The shots were still to us, to the Russians. And of course, I'm talking about Smirnoff. Smirnoff is really the ones who put in a lot of money to develop the vodka drinking business in the States, and actually, if not in the world.
Of course, there were other knockoffs that happened, and they went about using their own methods. Because, I mean, obviously, distilling alcohol was not a patented secret, so to speak. But Smirnoff, of course, had their own proprietary process. I believe their filtration process with carbon was a very innovative thing, and I'm sure that was probably kept as a trade secret. But yeah, no, they really, it's very interesting because you do still see, like, there's this vodka that I found called Georgii, has zero history with Russia, but it was started somewhere in the United States. It has a double-headed eagle. It's got the Russian, like a Russian name like Georgii there.
Exactly.
You see this
Georgii,
a lot.
Popov. Popov does have some roots, but it's kind of Popov was made in in New Jersey in the 40s. You could find their advertisements. And it's actually for a budget vodka, we'll get into that another time, but it's actually not a bad vodka. And there's Nikolai's. And I'm pretty sure you go to any supermarket, where you could get alcohol, you'll find these low brand, low budget type of offers. And
which you would never want to drink straight up. You would just want to mix it and have it as a mixed drink, I think, my opinion.
Right. But back in the 50s, 60s, when the Russians, Ruski Zarubezhye, the Russian diaspora living up, what were their options? Of course, first off, the first of two major brands it'll still be Smirnoff, and it would be Wolfschmidt.
We did a poll, actually, on the White Emigre Diaspora page on Facebook, and we found that quite a few people would have Wolfschmidt on the table, and there's a specific reason for that as well. Of course, Smirnoff wasn't the only game in town, and the other game that came into town in the 70s was Stolichnaya. Now, Stolichnaya was, made in the Soviet Union. This is when Nixon decided to do a trade deal with Pepsi-Cola. So we sell you the Pepsi-Cola, you sell us your Stolichnaya.
Yeah.
And Stolichnaya was out and about in the market. And a lot of our Russian emigres were like, yeah, but that came from the Soviet Union, and we don't want to support the Soviet Union at the time.
Yeah.
Right?
Taboo.
There were exceptions happens, as you note, right?
Yeah.
You've heard of people having Stolichnaya, right?
Sure. It would be
But
visible. It would be visible on certain people's dining room tables, but it was taboo. It was USSR,
Sovietskaya, yeah,
Sovietska, of course.
Sovietskaya, right? So that's very interesting. And then so Wolfschmidt ends up being very common. Wolfschmidt does have its origins from the Russian Empire in the beginning of the 20th century, but then it also migrated over to the United States. It was in the Baltic area. It was in Latvia. It originated from Latvia somewhere, which was part of the Russian Empire at the time. And what's interesting, if you take a look at the bottles of Wolfschmidt these days, they have the double-headed eagle, the Russian imperial eagle on it.
Yeah.
So, but it was made in the United States for many, many, many years. And that was kind of the most commonly available one for a while. And a lot of Russians would have it.
It was cheaper, mining. It was not the fact that all our parents and grandparents were penny pinchers, but back in the day, a penny saved here, it was like maybe 50 cents today or $1 today. So trust me, they were saving those cents. And it was a cheaper vodka, but there was not too many vodkas. You were limited with a good maybe 8 different brands of vodka available. Absol was not still around, not available everywhere, and Finlandia was not around, although that's also ex-Russian, so on. So you would really be very limited to a variety of vodkas. And Seagram's did have also vodka. There were several brands out there, but they were extremely rare to the ordinary public.
Absolutely. So, yeah, these are, so essentially, we have the situation where we have Stolichnaya, we have Smirnoffka, and we have Wolfschmidt as this trio of common vodkas that our community would drink. I guess if you were very principled anti-communist, you would have the Wolfschmidt and the Smirnoff. If you were a little bit more okay with stretching out, you would go to Stolichnaya.
Stoli started becoming more popular for us, youngers, right? Younger youth in the 80s when glasnost and perestroika started happening a little bit more on an escalated process. Then Stolichnaya started selling more. We would all of a sudden agree to start drinking Stolichnaya as young kids, as wanting something, hey, it's still Russian, oh, it's still Sovietskaya. But look at your parents, grandparents' albums. Look at their tables. Look at those black and white photos. If you see some, share them with us because it would be wonderful to see all these bottles and New Year's Eves and Maslenice and Din Angela and Pascha, every bline, right? You'll see the bottles of vodka available. And most likely it would have been one or two, Smirnoff or Wolfschmidt.
Well, I think one of the big things is also that, like, yeah, what we experienced essentially after, after the Cold War was an influx of new product from Russia. And I think you and I can both agree that the two most loved ones were Russian Standard, Ruski Standard, and Beluga, which comes in a
Sure,
numerous
you're talking after 1991, right?
Correct.
After
Yes. After the Cold War, from 1990s up just until 2022, where all of a sudden, because of all these sanctions and commercial restrictions, we're in a situation where it's virtually impossible to get Russian Standard and Beluga here in the United States at the moment. And Stolichnaya has changed its name to Stoli and severed any kind of connection with Russia. So
Yeah.
this is the state that we're in today.
Beluga now is being produced in Europe. And the idea there is to get returned back into the European and American markets. So Beluga is now available. And it just appeared down here in Florida. I was amazed. I was like, wow, wait a second. How's this Beluga here? Total Wine that I shop at. And I asked the manager, and the manager goes, yeah, it's now produced now in Europe.
So now we have our ammunition here on either side of us, as you could see. Yes. And the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to have a rite of passage, you see, because I never had Wolfschmidt before. So as we were discussing, it's important to do this right. and you have to have some kind of zakuska. So here, I'm going to show you. I have several kinds of bread. I have rjanoy chlieb, which is the classic Russian bread, the gray bread with a little, which is a touch sour. And then I have borodinsky chlieb, which is like this almost molasses-based kind of bread, right? And I have
in our time, Borodinsky used to be called Monastersky.
monastersky. There you go. Although there are other breads in monasteries, but nonetheless, that's the way it's called. So here we have sala, right? Your bacon, basically. And then over here I have eggplant caviar, as we call it in Russian, baklajanная икра. See that? Right? All of our families had baklajanная икра. That was a must.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to now try Wolfschmidt. And this shot glass used to belong to my great-grandmother, so I'm kind of trying to keep within the era of when Wolfschmidt would have been used, which was my great-grandmother's and grandparents' time. So here we go, Wolfschmidt. Now, if you take a look, it took me a bit of searching to find this bottle. You can see there's a double-headed eagle here, a Russian double-headed eagle, even though this was originated somewhere in Latvia, I believe. And now, plastic bottle. So you can see me pouring this here. I'm only going to do half because I got to do 3 shots here right away, so I'm trying to be nice on myself here. Look at that. Now, this is the other thing. Oh, we forgot. This is an important thing here, right? We don't say na Zdorovie, do we?
So there's a whole story to that. We understand, right? It's people, we now say na Zdorovie, right? But in reality, it's a mistake because if you ask a Russian, what is na Zdorovie? How could it be on health? Right? So they would say, if they would have said something about Zdorovie, they would say za Zdorovie.
За ваше здоровье.
За ваше здоровье. За здоровье. На здоровье. Our parents never said na zdоровье. Never. It was unheard.
It's like a Gesundheit. That's what it is essentially, right?
Well, yeah, right. But it was to ваше здоровье за Tanyu, за вас, за... It was a Charochka. It was a drink. It was a drink to do.
And the deer hunter pretty much made that like a thing, you know?
The deer hunter took that one step. That was in the 70s, right? 1977. And we're going to have a podcast about the deer hunter coming down later on this year. So, yeah, go ahead, Yura.
All right,
we're accustomed to saying it. We're accustomed to saying it. So you could say, if you want to, na Zdorovie.
No, I'm going to say za vaše zdоровье, and to all of our listeners. Whoa. This.
Look at you, you got the chills.
Brutal. I will say this is very brutal. I'm going to have an immediate zakuska here because this is 80 proof, okay? It's not that the alcohol is high here. It's the flavor. It's very peppery. Very peppery.
It's whatever it is.
I don't believe that our parents, grandparents would drink this stuff, honestly. I mean...
So, as Yura's drinking it right now, the reason why I'm not drinking it, because I already bought it about 2 years ago to have a reminiscence of Wolfschmidt vodka. And no matter who I gave it to, and yes, we do have vodka at our church gatherings, nobody wanted to drink it anymore after the first shot. And so, yeah, so I was not into the idea. I'll stick with these guys.
Smart. Well, it's a rite of passage. Now I finally had my Wolfschmidt experience. And I know why it's not easy to find it now. Yeah. Not for the good reasons that we think of the rare stuff, right?
Right. And our parents and grandparents used to drink it, right? Yeah. They used to drink it.
Okay, so I think now we can finally move on to the real business here. So I'll let you...
Let's start with the red label, right? Smirnoff. It's chilled, right?
Oh, yeah.
Label has changed. Mind you, label has changed. They've got the small little medals on top here, but it really has changed. And it's no more, you can't read the Russian version that says Smirnoffskaya vodka. It used to say that in Russian before. Today, it just says Smirnoff.
Right. Well, let's give it a shot. literally. And this one I'll take a full shot of because this is
So,
a. So here we have, this is a shot glass from the organization NOR, where you went to summer camp.
right, and this is from the Russian Heritage ball that we usually give out. And bull, 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 bull.
You know, you said that in sync with what my bottle was doing. It's incredible. Okay.
Okay.
Well, now if we're in Russia, you know, people like to make long toast, but we're going to spare everybody here. So
The idea here, still, for those who have never had a shot of vodka, just in case, don't breathe when you're drinking. Okay? Na Zdorovie.
Much better. much better than Wolfschmidt.
You can't go wrong, right? My zakuska are cheese, and this is Parmesan. It's about 40 years age here.
There you go.
And a kobaska. And if you want to do pickle.
I forgot to get the pickles. Now, what about smelling the bread like some people do? What do you think about that?
I don't smell rice crackers.
I got Borodinsky, so actually, wait, no, I think the better thing to use for that is Rjanoi.
So let me explain. There's some questions. Did people actually sniff the bread? Yes. It was common because it could be harsh, just like that Wolfschmidt. It's a harsh vodka. And the idea was to, after doing the shot, not to have the kick back, you would smell the bread. And it cleans up the alcohol. Remember what I said, don't breathe before you take a shot. Oh, exhale and drink, right? So still that there might be a kickback. And the people have that little, after the shot, well, you would sniff the bread before you would have that kickback. You would actually prevent it.
So the moment you take your shot, then you...
Yeah.
I'm going to try that this time.
Okay.
So the last one of the day.
So again, you drink down the shot and you sniff it. Drink down the shot and sniff it. And it kills right away a kickback. And eventually you'll get used to not sniffing the bread because you won't have the bread always around you. So, and white bread does not help. It's only dark bread. Okay. So let's move on. Oh, so what do you think? What was your feeling about Smirnoff red vodka?
Oh, definitely a huge improvement over Wolfschmidt.
All right, let's move on to a second bottle here. Smirnoff Blue Label or 100%, right? Let's give it a shot. Let's give it a shot. I like that. Let's give it a shot.
All right. There we go. Another one with a double-headed eagle here.
So you go.
The best tasting vodka always comes from a shot glass with double eagle.
Bull, 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 bull.
Here's to 100% in everything that we do.
There you go. Na Zdorovie.
Smoother. Wait. Okay.
Smoother. It's smoother.
Smoother for sure.
Yeah.
And worth it, in my opinion.
Yeah. It's
this is definitely an improvement over the red. The red was good, but this is on another level entirely.
Smirnoff sells is really not for drinking straight vodka. Smirnoff is still a mixed vodka. And so if you mix the vodkas with 100% or, 80%, it will still be considered a better brand, a better vodka for the mixed drinks. That's their gimmick still. So yeah, it's a nice vodka. You would find Blue Label, Black Label Smirnoff on our tables back in the day. So yeah,
was it Black Label that was somehow involved with copper, where it gave it a certain taste or something like that?
Absolutely, yeah. That was a gimmick. That was a gimmick. That
right.
that the Black Label would be a better preference to have a Moscow Mule.
Right.
So, what other movies did vodka start being introduced to the audiences? there's really two main movies that were very big with introducing Smirnoff vodka.
I can't guess right now.
Uh, James Bond 007, From Russia with Love, and their gimmick on how to drink vodka was shaken, not stirred, in a martini.
Shaken, not stirred is vodka related. I didn't think about that. Wow.
It's a martini, vodka martini,
A
and
vodka martini. Okay, I gotcha.
shaken, not stirred. And of course, they using martinis the other way, the other way around. So, anyway, I don't know. You could see this or not, but we'll be taste testing other brands eventually, right? And I think we'll be tasting numerous brands and just associating with everyone. We want to hear from you what brands you might be interested in drinking, or what other brands people used to drink, which I really doubt. I can only mention Popov. I think Popov was available. I remember seeing that brand in our small circle of friends and communities. There's Nikolai, there's Georgii, there's all these names here. There's so many of them.
There's a name for all of you. It's like Pepsi Cola. I mean, like Coca-Cola with the different names on the label.
Every state had its budget, or as they say, in bars, right? They had their own type of vodka that they had. Just a budgeted vodka to pour with the drinks. And if it was a Smirnoff, and I'm saying you still find Smirnoff as a mixed vodka preferred vodka at bars. But it's good for drinking a shot. It's perfectly fine.
Well, after having tasted this,
okay,
the 100, this is definitely a nice, smooth one to have a shot with. I definitely, of all these three, this guy wins the contest by a far shot, I would even say. So, in a way, I'm really glad we did this episode, because now I have been introduced to another good vodka to have on the table. And I would say this one's all right, especially if you're having brine. I mean, the brine are so good that, you're into the brine. But this is good with brine.
Yeah.
This over here shall be relegated to the dustbin of history, unless you make a nastoika out of it. And I think that's going to be my project. I'm going to make a nastoika out of this.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yura. Vodka you don't get rid of. You make those nastoikas. And you think about it. Flavored vodka. What is flavored vodka? It's nastoiki in reality. Modernized. And that's why Jack Martin wanted to create this idea along with Knudit, who, he said, well, in Russia, we had flavored vodkas, nastoikis. And goes, really? So what would you make it? So why do you find all these flavored vodkas today? Because it's a mixed drink. And there's nothing wrong with having a flavored raspberry, citrus, berry, and just like I shared with you yesterday, a Smirnoff ice drink with berries in there. That's the gimmick that Americans love to drink. They love this. It's a nastoika, but it's a flavored vodka. Right.
Absolutely. So we're going to experiment. Any of you have ever been in San Francisco in the Russian Center to the Russian Festival somewhere in February? It used to be. They would always have a whole suite of nastoiki available, which was really it was a major attraction. I remember a lot of people would come there just for that. Lots of interesting combinations from savory to sweet.
Yura, there's a church festival, I believe, somewhere in Pennsylvania, and they have flavored nastoikis at their festival, at their church festival. And you get to drink their flavored vodkas, which pass down the lines. And you're talking about third and fourth and fifth generations continuing this idea of flavored vodkas. And they actually flavored the vodkas. It's pretty good.
So we'll do some more stuff with vodka, everybody. We're gonna try some flavors. We're gonna try different kinds of vodka.
We want to hear from you. Nastoiki. Meaning, what did your grandparents, parents, for that matter, great grandparents, did they flavor their vodkas? If so, with what? I, for example, remember pine cones. Pine cones that my father wanted to flavor the vodka. I remember that he would have it in the Wolfschmidt bottles.
Wow,
He would get those pine cones inside there, the piece at a time would put in there and it would flavor it.
that's wild.
My father also used to do. My father also used to do sour cherries.
Oh, I once found a bottle that my paternal grandfather made with just it was I mean this bottle was 50 something years old when I found it. I didn't risk trying it, but it was a bunch of sour cherries in this big bottle. I mean, yeah, it's a
Yeah,
shame.
the bone, the kostочки, right? The seeds were on the bottom, and they were filled to the like, I don't know, 50, 100 cherry nuts, cherry seeds in there, right? So that was done. He would flavor it with. My grandmother used to flavor it with raspberries. Just put the raspberries in, and that would be already flavored. It would be a nastoika, but nastoika used to be made out of something that takes time to age, right? So not fermenting, but it would pass over the taste, the flavor. So in Russia today, it's common to hear nastoiki. Uh, it's very, let's say, it's very much, you don't find too many nastoiki that are available. But pine nuts, when I was in Novosibirsk many times, they actually had vodka nastoikas. I forgot the name of the kedrovay nastoika.
Cedar. Wow,
Kedrovay.
that's intense.
So we want to hear from you. What did your grandparents, parents, great grandparents, whatever, what nastoika did they do? And chances are they did. If you have photos, dig through your photos, share with us those photos of bottles of their times having fun.
Thank you for joining us. We really enjoyed discussing this. We're really looking forward to more contact with you. We want to thank everybody who has been participating, who has been sharing these podcasts, who has been making comments, liking, and even just watching. Because when you watch the podcast, especially the longer you watch it for, and we try to make it as interesting as possible so we don't bore you. The longer you watch it, the better we do with the search results, and we really are appreciative because we really want this to reach as many people as possible. We're not trying to make money here. We're trying to spread the word about our Ruski Zarubezhny community. So thank you so very much for helping us make this possible, for helping us share, and for sharing with us as well.
Let it be. So, na Zdorovie.